We're continuing in our sermon series on the book of Revelation. And today, we are going to continue in that in chapters 4 and 5 of Revelation. I read this past week about a story of a woman named Judith Strange. Judith was a woman, she's a grandmother who was recently vacationing in Iceland. As is the case often for many of the coastline of Iceland at this time of year, ice begins to build up. And you end up with glaciers on the side of the shore. And this was true with the area that Judith was in recently. There was a particular portion of the glacier that had been weathered by the elements and had come to look like an actual throne. And so Judith, being inspired by many others that had gone on before her, she wanted to go and sit on this throne, as she would say, I wanted to be a queen. And so she goes and she sits on this throne-like looking piece of ice and poses for a picture for her family to take. Unfortunately for Judith, though, this experience would be a bit different than those that had gone on before her, because a big wave would come crashing in at the very moment she would sit down on this piece of ice, breaking away the portion that she was sitting on, and it would causing it to drift out to sea. I have a picture here of Judith, very happy and not so happy, as she is drifting away into sea. And you can see the waves, there is some swells, the water is cold, her family couldn't get to her. Fortunately, there was a boat not too far away, and they were able to get the attention of the captain, who, with his glacier throne certification, came and rescued Judith from this iceberg that she was sitting on. Have any of you ever been rescued from something before? Maybe a few of you, yeah. From a car, maybe there was an accident. Perhaps it was a building that was on fire. You might even maybe stretch it out a little bit and say you were rescued from a relationship. Maybe you were even rescued from a job. Today, I don't want to talk to you about the things that you've been rescued from. I know that there may be some of you now that feeling like you need to be rescued from a particular situation that you're in. Maybe it's a relationship that you're wrestling with. And there's some things happening right now that you need some help to deal with. Perhaps your husband's gotten into a boat and he's pushed off the shore and you aren't sure if he's going to return. Maybe you're hanging on to the side of an edge right now and the waves of doubt keep crashing against you and you're not really sure if your faith can hold on. If a big one comes, you might drift away and be lost. Maybe you have some children that have drifted away and the waves are high, the water is cold, you can't get to them anymore, but you hope that somebody with some more resources than you can get to this child of yours and maybe rescue them, help them in the situation that they are in. And maybe you have a friend, a neighbor, perhaps even a sibling who's been sending up some SOSs, but the rescue just doesn't seem to come. One of the primary principles that we are going to be talking about in the study of the book of Revelation that's guiding us in our understanding of it is that if our interpretation of it today couldn't be understood by the original recipients of this letter, then we are probably interpreting it wrong. And so we have to understand that this letter was written to 7 churches in Asia Minor that needed to be rescued. They were going through some hard times. There's a city in which the union was so strong, the trade guild was so strong in this particular city, that there were Christians there that were compromising their faith to make idols that people were worshiping, and they're wanting to stay true to their faith, but they know that if they don't make these particular idols out of bronze that these people are worshiping, then they're going to be pushed out of their union, and then they'll have to move from that city. They're being ostracized. The emperor has essentially made Christianity illegal, at least true Christianity. He said, if you won't worship me, then you are going to face imprisonment, torture, even execution. There's stories in this day of Christians being taken into coliseums, and they're being fed to wild beasts as entertainment. Families passing children back down the line, hoping that maybe a miracle would take place, that the young child would be able to survive. There are a group of people in this day that needed to be rescued. And so, as we come into this text in Revelation 4 and 5, Jesus is going to speak here. What's interesting, though, is that Jesus isn't going to offer an explanation for the pain that these churches are going through. Because explanations rarely ever rescue us. Instead, what Jesus is going to do is he is going to take John up to heaven, and he is going to enter him into one of the most incredible without a doubt, the most incredible description of worship that we have in all of the Bible. He doesn't come to John and say, well, long ago, Adam and Eve, they ate some fruits and entered into the world. He doesn't say there was once an angel who thought he was greater than God. He was sent down to this earth, and now there is evil in this world. He doesn't say any of that. Instead, he takes him to an incredible experience of worship. And it's in the midst of the worship that John is going to discover where real rescue comes from. We pick up in Revelation chapter 4, verse 1. After this, I looked, and there before me, John, was a door standing open in heaven. And the voice I heard speaking to me, which is Jesus, like a trumpet, said, come up here, and I will show you what must take place after this. At once I was in the Spirit. This is the only way that this can take place. He is in the Spirit. We cannot go to heaven or experience heaven in our fleshly, broken down bodies. That doesn't work in our sinfulness. But in the Spirit, this becomes possible. And there before me was a throne. 14 times in these 2 chapters, the word throne is used. We're going to get an incredible description of all that is happening around this throne. And we're going to offer some explanation of that description of what is going on around the throne. But we have to understand the point is not what's around the throne. The point is what is on, who is on the throne. And the one who sat there, and in heaven with someone sitting there. And the one who sat there had the appearance of jasper and ruby. A rainbow that shone like an emerald encircled the throne. And so the throne is at the center. And John, notice that John doesn't use humanistic phraseology to explain God. He doesn't describe his skin complexion, his hair, his height. Instead, he stretches his vocabulary as far as it will go, and he focuses on light and precious stones. The explanation for these precious stones is not that God looks like a rock. No. It's jasper equals the purity of God. A ruby represents the wrath of God. An emerald represents the mercy of God. And all of that is present in this particular experience, in the center of this experience on this throne. In our world today, you will find lines of thinking that it's difficult to find a throne in. Best case scenario is, for many of these lines of thinking, atheism, materialism, humanism, is that you are on the throne. But the problem with that becomes, if you're on the throne, then that means that you have to have control of everything. And I think that that's one of the great sources of anxiety in our world today. We've never been in a time in which we've been more safe than we are now. In all of human history, you are the safest that human people have ever known themselves to be, and yet we are more anxious than anyone has ever been. Because many of us, I think, put ourselves on a throne, and we realize that in the end, we don't reign. We don't have control. What we're going to find here is that at the center of this worship service is God on this throne. The lesson that we learn here is that when you need rescued, worship centers you. It helps you to see who is really there, and it's not you. Worship allows for that. From time to time, I'll pray with my children, and I'll ask them to finish a sentence. I'll say, why is it that you love God? And then I try to get a response from them. It's hard for them to answer that question. God, I love you because. God, I worship you because they just haven't learned those things. It's hard for us because sometimes we forget those things. We forget how great He is. We forget how powerful He is. We forget how gracious He is. And yes, we forget His justice as well. But in the Old Testament, as you consider God, in the Old Testament, you have the Israelites that when they needed the Red Sea parted, He parted it. That when they wandered the wilderness and they were hungry, He gave them manna from the sky. That in the Old Testament, when Joshua needed a little bit more daylight to win the battle, God caused the sun to stand still. But do you know what our problem is? Our struggle with this. Metaphorically speaking, we get too focused on these mountains out here. And there's a mountain in front of you that you get so focused on that you forget about the mountain mover who's above you. And if you aren't entering into these worship type of experiences and you're not allowing yourself to be reminded of who's really on the throne, then those mountains can become overwhelming because you can't climb them on your own. And maybe you're standing in the shadow of a mountain right now. And there's a dark temptation that you keep succumbing to again and again and again and again. Or maybe there's some tension in your home, relational tension in your home right now that's just not resolving. And you're trying to climb that mountain. You're trying to fix the situation, but it's just not fixing. It's not fixable. And maybe in that moment, you need to remember what Jesus said. If you could just have the faith of a mustard seed, you can say to that mountain, throw it into the sea, and there it will go. Worship centers you around the one who could move the mountain that is in front of you. And John is going to be taken into this worship experience, and there, in spite of all that is around him, and his situation isn't very good either. He's on Patmos. He's exiled. He's not in a good state. He's not in a good place right now. And it's there that he realizes Domitian is not the one on the throne. God is. Surrounding the throne were 24 other thrones, and seated on them were 24 elders. They were dressed in white and had crowns of gold on their heads. Now we have to understand what this 24 is. Again, in Revelation, you shouldn't take numbers literally unless it says you should take this number literally. It's rare that you take a number literally. Generally, they're pointing towards something else that's beyond that. And so, what are these 24 elders? What are they representing for us? Well, I would propose to you that the 24 elders represent the 12 apostles and the 12 tribes of Israel. Some would disagree with me on this, and that's okay, because where we end up is still the same place, and I'll show you that in a minute. But in heaven, on the gates of heaven, you have the 12 tribes of Israel's names. The foundation stones of those gates that everyone is walking through is the names of the apostles. The 12 apostles and the 12 tribes of Israel, in my opinion, represent the totality of God's people. All from the Old Testament, everyone from the New Testament, and everyone since then who has come to believe in Jesus. And this is helpful for us as we're going to see concentric circles around this throne that the text lays out for us. I'm sorry, let me go back here. So they were all dressed in white, and they had gold crowns. From the throne came flashes of lightning, rumblings, and peals of thunder. Again, he is stretching as far as he can go to explain God. In front of the throne, 7 lamps were blazing. These are the 7 spirits of God. Also, in front of the throne, there was what looked like a sea of glass, clear as crystal. The sea of glass explanation of God is perhaps one of my favorite. I know you may not realize this is the most accurate description in the entire Bible of who God is. This is the most untainted description we have of God in all of the Bible. And it's there before him that there's a sea of glass. You have to understand in the first century that these people, they believed the sea to be evil, chaotic, something that you couldn't trust. There were high waves. There was cold water in this sea. And no one dare reach into it because you just never knew what was going to happen. Only the bravest would take on water. And before God, this sea is glass. And so what does that represent for us? It represents this: evil being vanquished. Because anyone could go into this water because it was a sea of glass. If you think about back in the Gospels, in the New Testament, Jesus is with his disciples, and they're on the Sea of Galilee, and a great storm comes upon their boat. They think that they are going to lose their lives. They despair of life, and they wake up Jesus. Now, many people would say that this is a great example of Jesus being greater than the elements, and I believe that is absolutely true, the wind and the waves. But I also think there's more going on there than this. I feel like this is spiritual warfare that is taking place in this particular instance. Satan, knowing he can't defeat Jesus, he knows, though, that he sees the trajectory of the disciples, and he's wanting someone to lose their life, and so the storm comes upon them. They were fishermen. I know the Sea of Galilee has storms come on it suddenly, but they would have known how to navigate these waters. They had spent their entire lives on these waters. How did they all of a sudden have this great storm come upon them? I believe that was Satan. I said this to you last week. How do you know if you're under spiritual warfare? The answer is simple. It's not that you're going through a trial. There's all kinds of trials in this life. Satan doesn't care if you're rich or you're poor, you're healthy, you're sick. He cares about your faith. When you're going through a situation that's causing you to doubt your faith, that's how you know you're in the midst of spiritual warfare. And so what does Jesus say to his disciples after he calms the storm? How could you not think I was greater than these waves? No, he doesn't say that. He said, where was your faith? You're losing your faith. There's a battle taking place here. Don't lose your faith. I am greater than all of these seas, all of these elements. Oh yeah, I'm greater than evil, as well. And there was a sea of glass before God, before the throne. And here's a picture of that particular scene that we're talking there as Jesus is calming the waters. In the center around the throne were 4 living creatures, and they were covered with eyes in front and in back. This is not a horror film, okay? There isn't a monster roaming around in heaven that you have to avoid. The eyes speak of awareness. And John is again doing the best he can to describe the awareness that these creatures have. They are aware of everything. The first living creature was like a lion. The second was like an ox. The third had the face like a man. The fourth was like a flying eagle. Each of the 4 living creatures had 6 wings. To them, to be able to fly was great. It was an incredible thing in this day to be able to fly. You could do anything if you could fly. And they had 6 wings. It speaks of their power, their swiftness, with eyes all around them, above and under. These animals, beings represent this. The lion represents nobility, the ox strength, the human wisdom, the eagle swiftness. And it's in the midst of this worship that they are stronger and more aware than they have ever been, as they are centered around God, as they are in their proper position, and understand that this is the greatest instance of nobility, that as they're describing the lion, that there isn't anything more noble. There isn't anything stronger. There isn't anything wiser. There isn't anything that is more swift. And yet, even in the midst of their greatness, they still worship. Here's the lesson that we learn as we go on through this text. Then I looked and heard the voice of many angels, numbering thousands upon thousands and 10,000s times 10,000s. Again, you can't take these numbers literally. John doesn't sit there in this moment and say, 1, 2, 9,000, 9,001. He doesn't do that. He's not counting them like that. There's millions upon millions of angels. And they encircled the throne and the living creatures and the elders. And then there's the next layer. And then I heard every creature in heaven and on earth and under the earth and on the sea, all of creation, animals, plants, they're all worshiping in this moment. There are circles. As we're going to find in a moment, it is the Lamb who is in the center. There are 4 living creatures. They're the 24 elders that represent all of God's people. They're the angels, millions upon millions. And then there's all the rest of creation giving him glory. And in this moment, catch this, they are all connected. When you need worshiped, when you need rescued, worship connects you. There are moments when God intervenes into our lives supernaturally. It happens. More often than not, he works through those that are around us. Several years ago, my wife, our daughter Madison, and I were swimming in the Ohio River. We had gone out on a boat. It was a sailboat with friends of ours, and we were swimming in the water. My wife, daughter, they were smart. They had life vests on. I did not have a life vest on. And so we're swimming in this water, and you may not be familiar with the Ohio River, but it's a mile wide. There is a lot of water. It's rather deep. The current is strong. But hey, I jumped in without a life vest. We'll see what happens. So I jump in this water with them. We're swimming. We're having a good time. All of a sudden, we notice that the boat is getting away from us. And then we realize it's not the boat getting away from us. It's us getting away from the boat. The current was pulling us away. As soon as we realize this, we start swimming. And I'm trying to pull them the best I can. And I'm swimming and swimming. But I'm getting exhausted because I cannot fight this current. The current was that strong. I couldn't catch up with the boat, and it's a sailboat, so they're not able to turn around and come back and get us. And we're just stuck in the middle of the water. Now, fortunately, they had life vests, but I didn't. And it was becoming a bit dire. And I just looked at my wife and I said, I'm not going to make it. Now, obviously, I'm here, so you know how the story ends. But I just said, I'm not going to make it. Now you have to understand that what I meant was I'm not going to make it to the boat. I mean, I wasn't going to drown, okay? I just wasn't going to be able to make it to the boat, but she didn't know that. So my daughter's crying. My wife thinks I'm going to die. And I'm like, I just rolled over on my back and started floating because that was my only option at that point. And then, fortunately, there were some others who were around us in their boats. And so we waved our arms and eventually got some people to come and pull us out of the water and get us into their boats. And we were rescued in that instance. The lesson I learned that day was, if you need to be rescued, you better not be alone. There's a tendency of ours that when we go through hard times, we like to isolate ourselves. But yet again, one of the greatest ways that God helps us is through sometimes the encouraging words of those that are around us. It's through the empathy that can be shared as somebody relates to the challenges that you're going through. It's through the celebration that you receive as maybe you're getting to experience some good times in life. The beauty of this worship is that it helps us to connect with other people, often the people who God uses to rescue us. The text goes on, "Then I saw in the right hand of him who sat on the throne a scroll with writing on both sides, sealed with 7 seals. God is great. He is so massive in this moment, and the scroll is equally large. On the front and the back is writing, the story is complete." That's what that means. And there are 7 seals. This is sealed shut. You're going to have to be pretty special to get to open it. And I, John, saw a mighty angel proclaiming in a loud voice, "Who is worthy to break the seals, to open the scroll?" But no one in heaven or on earth or under the earth could open the scroll or even look inside of it. They looked everywhere. No one was found to be worthy. And so John weeps. He wept because no one was found who was worthy to open the scrolls and look inside of it. Why is he crying? Because the scroll had the plan of God laid out before them. That's what the scroll represents here. It's God's perfect plan. And John, he is in the midst of hurt and pain. Children have lost their lives. People have believed in Jesus. They've been thrown to wild beasts. People are losing their businesses. They're being pushed out of communities. He himself has been exiled. He just wants to make sense of it all. And God's plan that should be rolled out can't be rolled out because no one is worthy to do it. And he cries. Then one of the elders said to me, "Do not weep. See, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, has triumphed. He is able to open the scroll and its 7 seals." And then I saw a lamb. He expected a lion, a great beast, but God gave him a lamb because in the midst of his weakness, he is strong, looking as if he had been slain. He had gone through a hard time too, but is he still down? No. He's standing at the center of the throne. He's standing. That's why you can worship, because he isn't down anymore. And encircled by the 4 living creatures and the elders, the Lamb had 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent out into all of the earth. And he was able to open the scroll. He is able to open the scroll. And we got to understand the significance of that because he's able to roll out the scroll for us, it's there that God's plan and the hurt and the trials, the things that we need to be rescued from, can be brought into consummation and can be made sense of. 10 days ago, I have had a first cousin of mine who I grew up with, ran around with a little bit. He was younger than me, so more often than not, I was looking after him, who overdosed on heroin. He had been in jail for quite some time, for a few months actually, since December, and his body had detoxed from the heroin. But if you're not familiar with drugs, heroin is by far one of the strongest drugs that anybody can get addicted to. Once you're into that drug, it takes you years to be separated from it. And he was addicted. His mother came and picked him up at prison just a week and a half ago after he'd been released. There was some tension at home with his dad, so she didn't take him home. She took him to a hotel. My Aunt Tracy gave him a little bit of money for some food. Cody said he would go and buy some food, stay there the night. They would see each other in the morning. That night, he went and got some heroin with that money, took a hit that his body couldn't absorb. You see, addicts, they don't realize that when they relapse, they forget the tolerance that their body had built up through the time of their addiction. And so when they detox, they can't jump back into where they were at. The body just can't absorb it. He went into cardiac arrest. He's gone. And his mom gave him the money to buy the heroin. She's not taking calls right now. And it may be 6 months. It might be a year. Maybe 6 years from now. But when the moment comes that I can sit and talk with her, I want to point her towards this. I want to point her towards the scroll. That there's a scroll that God is going to just lay out for us one day. And he's going to take us to the part of the plan that is our part. It's the hurt and it's the pain. And he's going to say, Tracy, right here is where Cody died. And I want you to see how I've redeemed that. And this is where it fits in the midst of my plan that brings all of this into order and makes all of this make sense and provides us with a sea of glass that is before the throne. It's right here, Tracy. And he's going to take you there, and he's going to show you the part of the scroll that has the affair, that had the business that you thought was going to thrive, and maybe you thought your athletic career was going to go further than it did, and he's going to show you that part, and he's going to show you the part about your parents' Alzheimer's, and he's going to show you the part about your kids that just seem to go off the rails and had all these emotional and mental issues that you can't struggle with, and that you're struggling with, that you can't make sense of, and he's going to say, this is where it fits. And that's why John was crying, because he didn't think anybody was going to be able to lay it out like that. But the Lamb who was slain stands. And the scroll is rolled out. And they all worship because they realize there is hope in the midst of that. And what we see is this, is that he went and he took the scroll from the right hand of him who sat on the throne. And when he had taken it, the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb. And each one of them had a harp, and they were holding the golden bowls full of incense, which are the prayers of God's people, because now that the Lamb is standing, the prayers can be answered in Jesus' name. And they sang a new song, saying, you are worthy to take the scroll and to open its seals, because you were slain, and with your blood you purchased for God persons from every tribe and language and people and nation. The 4 is significant there. It's the 4 corners of the earth. All of it is covered. You have made them to be a kingdom and priests to serve our God, and they will reign on this earth. And when they saw the Lamb standing, they were encouraged. The thing that's going to rescue you isn't going to be more letters after your name. It won't be another degree. It won't be more money. It won't be a house or a vacation. And often, that's all that we are left with when we don't turn to the Lamb who is standing. And when those things are what's going to rescue us, we're going to be found, we're going to be found very, very discouraged in the midst of that. But these people, they were encouraged. When you need rescued worship, it encourages you. Joni Eareckson Tada is a woman who many stories have been told of. She's a quadriplegic. She wasn't always in this condition, though, if you aren't familiar with her. At the age of 17, she was the captain of her field hockey team. Her best friend was a girl named Jackie. After their last game of high school, as is the case with most of our last games in high school, they lost. They were heartbroken. In the back of their bus, they cried and they wept that their season, their high school career, it had ended. But there, Jackie and Joni began to sing a song, Man of Sorrows. And they were reminded that even in the midst of their pain, God could relate to them. That God, He had lost a son too. And that their hurt and their pain, well, it could be made sense of. A few months later, Jackie and Joni were swimming in a lake. And Joni would dive into a shallow portion of it, breaking vertebrae in her neck, causing her to, again, have this condition. Jackie wanted to see Joni, but it was rather difficult to get in to see her because, well, there was a lot of doctors coming and going. One night, Jackie hid in the waiting room until the hallway lights went out. There weren't nurses making any more rounds, and she snuck into Joni's room. When she snuck into Joni's room, Joni saw her out of the corner of her eye, this silhouette crawling across the linoleum floor. She rebuked Jackie and said, they're going to kick you out of here if they catch you. But Jackie shushed her, climbed in bed with her best friend, held her hand up to her face because she knew that Joni couldn't feel it. And it's there that she sang the words, Man of sorrows. What a name for the Son of God who came, ruined sinners to reclaim. Hallelujah. What a Savior. And Jackie, in that moment, would provide Joni, as she would say, with one of the most sacred moments of her life. That she realized that because God had offered his Son for us as a sacrifice, that there really was hope in the midst of this pain, that there really could be a rescue in spite of this terrible condition that she was going to be in for the rest of her life. It wasn't going to be able to be reversed. But even in the midst of that, there could be rescue, there could be encouragement, there could be hope. But it wouldn't be found in the doctors. It wouldn't be found in medication. It would be found in a slain lamb who is now standing, and in a scroll that could be rolled out, and a plan that would make sense of it all. And if you're somebody who needs to be rescued, certainly you will be somebody who needs to be rescued one day. Know that you have a lamb who is slain, but he is now standing. And because of that, we can have a hope that will not disappoint us, and a God that works all things for the good of those who love him. Let's pray. Gracious Heavenly Father, we're grateful for the hope that we have of this book, the plan that's laid out before us that we get to be a part of. It's hard to make sense of these moments where we get pushed off into a sea that seemingly wants to take our lives. But help us to have hope and to realize that there is always a rescuer nearby, and you are that rescuer. We pray this in your Son's name.